I don't intend to try to provide an insight into the possible range of personal responses to such transgressions. Each response will depend on the individual's sense of integrity and, where appropriate, remorse. How we deal with injuring someone in a car accident due principally to our own carelessness, and the consequences of the accident will depend on our respective personalities, our sense of responsibility and our courage. What we are fundamentally will in all likelihood be revealed in such circumstances. Failure can also be a self-recognition of not achieving goals that we have independently and legitimately set for ourselves in life. For example, to be an excellent pianist, sculptor, 400 metres runner, or fashion designer. Or perhaps more prosaically, to maintain a happy personal relationship. Failure to meet our fundamental personal goals, whether because we didn't quite have the ability, didn't get the breaks we needed, or because circumstances conspired against us despite our best endeavours, will confront us with the challenge of dealing with personal failure. This failure to reach our own goals or expectations despite our best endeavours is one difficult but inevitable element of human existence. Baron de Coubertin, the founder of the modern Olympics, stated that it is not in the winning but in the taking part. He probably didn't say that because he was Belgian, but nevertheless. On the other hand, the coach of the UCLA Bruins, Henry Sanders, famously proffered the view in 1950 that winning isn't everything, it is the only thing. It can be less than comforting to tell someone who has experienced a significant personal failure, never mind dear, you did your best. In my experience, people tend to reject the de Coubertin approach for that of Henry Sanders. I bloody well didn't win, I failed. So for those who set high personal standards and commit themselves to meeting those standards, and who don't achieve them, the experience will be painful. Grief will inevitably be experienced, because something has been lost. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross identified the stages of grief as denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. In my experience, and I generally find dealing with failure a challenge, there are two fundamental aspects to managing this form of failure: accepting the feelings associated with the experience and dispensing self-kindness. Failure can also be a subjectively perceived inability to meet goals or achieve outcomes, the significance of which are determined early in life by the influences, values, and judgments of someone in a position of personal power. That is, failure to meet someone else's goals. In my view, this classification of failure poses significant personal challenges. It establishes for the individual who is subject to those induced life criteria the prospect of dealing with a long-term, generalised or goal-specific sense of failure. It can result in a continuing sense of not having achieved an essential and irrefutable goal, being an Olympic sports person, an established artist, acquiring a tertiary qualification, or an abiding and unshakable sense of general inadequacy that will have implications for all facets of that person's life. A belief that one has to achieve someone else's personal goal is both irrational and at the same time real. The basis for the belief is irrational. The belief is real and thrives in the psyche of the particular individual. I'm talking here about the projected aspirations of parents and other primary carers. Such criteria for personal success in life are arguably grafted onto what would otherwise be a genuinely formed personality. There are someone else's values and goals which may have no valid part in the formation of our psyches. If we find ourselves in pursuit of someone else's goals, we need to try to recognise what is genuinely part of us and what is not. This is part of the process of finding our true, authentic selves. We somehow need to distinguish between our goals and expectations and someone else's. And the distinction may be buried deep inside our early childhoods, with abiding subliminal messages influencing our thoughts, emotions, and behaviour. A deeper sense of failure goes beyond the specific task of meeting goals, whether they be someone else's or those of society at large. It tends to be reflected in an assumption of general personal inadequacy that erodes confidence in achieving anything of worth in life. I am a failure. This is a category of perceived failure that will often be induced by the express or implied messages received in early childhood from primary carers. Impatient reactions to the fumbling attempts of a young child to respond to a daily challenge, comments such as, "You're hopeless," "Look, this is simple," "Your sister can do better than this," however benign they may appear to the person uttering the words, run the risk of inculcating an abiding sense of inadequacy that may haunt the recipient of the messages throughout life. Perhaps the most influential contributors to our notion of success and thus failure are our primary carers. What our parents and teachers convey to us as criteria for success, and how they educated us to deal with failure by instruction and example, are two interrelated features of personality development that will profoundly shape our lives. This category, an induced sense of inadequacy, like the last, may also be deeply hidden in the psyche. Overcoming the influence of cruel and thoughtless early childhood messages will send us on a journey in search of who we truly are. It will be a journey of self-caring, expression of grief for our losses, and one of hope that we will gradually and eventually discover who we really are and the human potential that exists in us. Finally, failure appears to me to include a perceived inability to achieve goals, standards and outcomes established by external, socio-economic and political forces that determine expedient social norms that are to be aspired to by the population at large. The circumstances that I have assigned to this fifth classification of failure are pervasive, seductive, and in my view, in their extreme, are socially pernicious. The complex relationship between economic aspiration, industry, commercialism, and politics provides a set of criteria in our lives not based on moral precepts or standards, but on pragmatic manipulation of the human psyche to achieve corporate and personal ends. Essentially, an unfettered market will consciously or unconsciously work toward persuading members of society to adopt what producers of goods and services perceive as legitimate needs, thus blurring the distinction between needs and wants. The late Michael White, an Adelaide-based therapist, defined this issue in terms of power and the way in which we are both the source and subject of social power systems. He made the following observation in his essay, Addressing Personal Failure. I believe that the phenomenon of personal failure has grown exponentially over recent decades. Never before has the sense of being a failure, to be an adequate person, been so freely available to people. Never before has it been so willingly and routinely dispensed. It would now be very rare for me to meet a person in the course of my practice, in the course of my teaching, or in the course of my everyday social life who hasn't experienced at different times and to differing degrees the spectre of personal failure